Welcome to Mastering Life's Adventures, an educational podcast about tapping into your true self, the soul, the substance of your life, to discover what life's ups and downs are really about, and how to have a greater sense of purpose, peace, joy, and fulfillment. I am Dr. Judith Holder, your host, coach, psychologist, fellow seeker who enjoys diving into the connections between spirituality, psychology, wellness, and your everyday life's adventures. All preparing and polishing you like the facets of a magnificent diamond to be your best self. If you're craving more from your life, you are in the right place. Come, let's journey together and transforming what you know into who you really are. Mastering Life's Adventures begins now.
Hi, I'm back. I'm back to talk about a continuation of something I talked about in part one, which was really focused on approaching avoidance. And I was thinking about that. I was thinking about it more and the ego and what the ego does and how the ego and the soul are so much in parallel with each other, how it wants to continue to evolve and grow. So one of the things that I wanted to continue to talk about, and besides, I'm getting to the ego in a minute, but I wanted to also talk about that avoidance hinders the soul's progress. And that's where I ended talking about. It hinders us. It stops us. It creates this immobilization. We freeze when we avoid emotional stuff. And actually part one was around underneath all this avoidance is some emotional things that are going on for us, which you can hear and listen to more. One of which of those qualities is fear. And fear gets in our way. Fear has this somatic symptoms that come up in us, such as our heart starts to beat very quickly. Our heart starts to palpitate. We find ourselves, we get sweaty. We find maybe some individuals get the shortness of breath that happens when we're fearful of something that is being asked for us to do, or something that we feel that there may be a failure to, or that we feel that we will be judged or rejected in some particular way, which I had mentioned in the part one. So we get into this jitteriness and we feel in ourselves, and since it doesn't feel very good, we end up avoiding doing that particular activity or following through on the particular request that was being asked of us. And that does have an impact on the soul because it does hinder the soul from continuing to grow and advance, that I mentioned before. But also that when we have these physical sensations, we always think about that means I don't need to do it. But that's not true at all. It gets back to this approaching, leaning forward to these feelings that we're having and being curious around them and knowing just because I'm having a heart palpitation, it just alerted me that there's a physiological reaction occurring with me, and that physiological reaction of the cortisol and adrenaline being released to the body is that fight, flight, freeze, or appease that takes place with us. So we know that, but we can transcend that. And this is this quest of the soul, and the quest of walking a spiritual path is, that's the physiology reaction that's happening. And it's maybe tied to some thoughts and feelings that I'm having, that maybe I'm thinking about something that's happened in the past, which I didn't do very well. That's why I don't want to do that project, or they meet that request that's being asked of me, or something in the future that somehow I'm going to be embarrassed by it, or I'm going to feel as I'm not going to show up in the appropriate way. And so then it may then trigger us to have certain feelings, and that feelings is that fear and that wanting to avoid and not do it, feeling anxious, feeling that somehow we're be spotted, that we're vulnerable. And that's part of the quality of fear, that we're vulnerable in some way, and we don't like to be vulnerable as human beings. I get that. But what happens is, I'm talking about a cycle that happens, that you first have the physiological reaction. That's what you notice. But even before that physiological reaction that's creating this avoiding behavior is also how we're thinking about the situation, how we're feeling about the situation, and what memories are brought up from past situations that we've had with this particular request or this particular activity that we're being asked to do. And one of the things is to think about the ego. And the ego, uses all its faculties and all of its means to be able to move through the situations that it finds itself in on a day-to-day basis. But how can we do that with the soul in mind? To know that there is a process that we too can determine for ourselves, to conquer, to master some of these emotional situations that come up. Instead of avoiding them, we approach them. We handle them. That when we feel shortness of breath, we breathe. We breathe in, we breathe out. We do diaphragmatic breathing, and we clear our mind so it can clear our heart, so we have greater space of awareness, of the soul's awareness of what we need to do, or the Christic awareness of what we need to do, or the I am presence, the Atman, the inner Christ that exists within us that knows how to handle all situations that come our way. If we move from the outer fear factor and move to the inner guiding factor. And that inner guiding factor is we're always using the data that we are experiencing within us as just that, data. Okay, this is something that's making me fearful, or making me feel anxious, or making me mad or angry or sad or depressed. What is it? How do I need to handle it? And what the ego does, which we can learn from, the ego will look at it, will look at the situation with a keen vision. It will assess the situation. It will look at it. It will fly to the highest point of a cliff or a mountain, sit, observe. It will tilt his head to the right, tilt his head to the left, seeing all that it needs to see, beholding a clear vision of what's going on here. That's what the soul wants us to do. Take the higher view of what needs to happen. It's what I say in sometimes the analogies, that we can either float through a situation or we can use a trampoline and bounce on it to see the higher situation, the higher vision, the higher view of what's going on. This is where this situation comes in. We want to bounce on that trampoline to see the higher view. The other third one I use is being on a skateboard and not getting stuck in a situation, but staying on the skateboard, observing the situation, seeing it, and keep on moving through it. But what happens when we're feeling these emotions of fear or anxiety or uncertainty, or as if we don't know what to do in the situation, we freeze, or we avoid, or we suppress, as I mentioned before in the other episode. We suppress. But what we need to do is perk up, look, observe. Why am I feeling this? What's going on in this situation for me? Is it something that I need to be fearful of? Because you may end up saying, not really. So why am I having this strong reaction? Oh, it's because it's new to me. But I don't need to have this type of fight, freeze, or appease type of experience, or the fright that's getting in the way for you to be able to look in a keen way about what needs to happen. And you're asking that question to your soul. What needs to happen? So there's three other qualities that I think tie very much into what the soul is looking for us to do in terms of developing skills and moving things forward, as opposed to avoiding. And also, through that process of avoiding, it creates this issue around fogginess. And what the ego wants and what the soul wants is clarity. Clarity of what is the best next thing for me to do. So the other quality of the ego that I found very fascinating is it's fearless. It's fearless. No matter what the size of the prey, be it a goat, be it, something larger, a tiger, it is able to swoop down knowing that it has the talents and the abilities to manage the situation. What happens to us? That we get into this fear factor and we don't have the wherewithal to handle the situation. And that's not true. We can learn, we can grow, we can know that there's a reservoir of strengths and talents that we can tie into. But because we create this barrier of fear or avoiding behavior, it creates this inability for us to tap into the greatness of who we really are. That I am presence, the Christic light. Understanding that there's certain virtues that we do have within ourselves that we've been cultivating and will continue to cultivate, so that when situations happen to us, we can be like the eagle, fearless, knowing that with God, all things are possible. That with God, who guides and directs me, will help me to know what I need to do in this particular situation. There's this fearlessness that the eagle has because it trusts itself. It trusts its talents. It trusts its abilities. How can we do that as well? That then supports the soul, helps to develop and be aware of the skills and gifts that we have to give in the situation that we find ourselves in, be it at work, be it at home, interpersonally, wherever it may be, if we're in listening grace. So when we have this quality of fearlessness, it is also a quality that we have an instinctual nature to protect not only our soul, but those that we cherish, those that we value, that we love. That there's going to be, it's like the fierce mother when her child is being attacked or harmed or hurt in any way. So no, you don't. It's like when that fierce mother is in a car accident and their child is penned in the car, she will find the energy to lift that. And we have been stories about this. Will lift that vehicle to get that child out because that's the love that she has. And that's the conviction that she uses. So we have to think about that. How do we apply that to situations which are these emotions that will try to look bigger than life, that we have to fear, or the situation, the person, or the circumstance that looks bigger than life, that we are finding ourselves incapacitated in some particular way. We have to challenge that, and we have to know that all things are possible through God who strengthens us. All things are possible through God who strengthens us. And we need to be able to anchor ourselves in the wisdom of the Bible, or the wisdom of inspiration, or the wisdom of some spiritual teachings, Imitation of Christ, for example, by Kempis. We need to anchor ourselves and have that as our daily diet of information, of things that we're studying or learning or growing from, or things that we've learned from the YouTube on understanding how to be more Christ-like in your interactions, or whatever the teachings that you may want to be from church or whatever, or Bible study. We need to always make sure that is nurturing us, that gives us the strength to manage the situations that come into our life. And this brings up the other quality, tenaciousness. An eagle is very tenacious. And it's very tenacious because when there is a storm that happens, that I mentioned in my last episode, when there is a storm that takes place, it will know what it needs to do. It will, and also the tenaciousness is it will learn to fly through that storm or fly up above that storm and to be able to look at it and manage it and see how it needs to navigate the particular situation that it finds itself in. So that's soaring to greater heights. You know, it's the same thing as us soaring to challenging any anxiety, avoidance, fear, procrastination that we may experience, that I mentioned in our last episode, that when we're experiencing that, this is a way that we're approaching the situation in a higher way and being tenacious about it to say, no, there's no way that this energy is going to get the best of me. I will do what it takes for me to manage this. And sometimes it may be taking a class that allows you to develop the skills. Sometimes it requires meditation so that you know that deep within you, you have this reservoir of energy that can help you to manage the situation. It may require you to be able to talk it through with someone. Whatever it takes, you're tenacious. You're tenacious. Looking at the ego, looking at the soul wants you to be tenacious. It wants you to say, I'm going to learn from this experience. I'm going to grow from this experience. I'm going to use the reservoirs of resources that I have to be able to manage the situation because I understand myself more. I've done the things. I've set up the building blocks, to build the house of understanding of who I am, of who I truly am. And with the gifts and graces that I can manage the situations that happen to me in my life. Now, the last quality, the fourth quality that I want to talk about is this quality that happens with an eagle. And that is they possess vitality, what the soul so much wants us to be aware of. That we can have the vitality to transform ourselves, to change ourselves. Did you know that for an eagle, they can regenerate themselves? And it usually happens around the age of 30. What happens in that, at around 30, is that their physical body starts to deteriorate. And when it's deteriorating, it can go pretty fast. It can make it very difficult for them to survive in the wilderness or wherever they find themselves in. So what the eagle does, it retreats to a mountain top, a place that's secure, that's protected. And then over the course of 5 months, period, it goes through this metamorphosis. Isn't that fascinating? It goes through this process of metamorphosis. It literally knocks off its own beak, by banging it against a rock, taking it off. It literally plucks out its talons and then its feathers. And each of these stages produces regrowth by the removing of these parts, these body parts, allowing the eagle to be able to gain another 30 to 40 years. It's like the butterfly goes through the metamorphosis. So an eagle does go through the metamorphosis. It does it intentionally. It does it instinctively. It knows what it needs to do in order to survive, but also in order to use the inner wisdom to be even better. Now, how might you apply that to the soul's growth and these situations that happen to us in the world as relates to the avoiding of behavior and the need for us to approach behavior, approach the things that don't feel comfortable to us, approach the emotions that are feeling out of whack in us, of anxiety or fear or doubt or uncertainty, and say, how do I transform myself? How do I look at these pain points? Because I suspect some of this that the eagle is doing is painful, but it's doing for the greater good of its survival. What do we need to do to help our soul to survive? What are the things that we can instinctively be aware of that allows our soul to flourish, to grow and advance? And it's not always having to say, it's got to be no pain. Well, pain has its point, and I may make an episode around pain as well. But pain has its point. We don't like it, no, but we don't avoid it. We know that it's for our greater good. We know that it's there to be able to maybe to show us something, make wiser choices, to say yay to this and nay to that, and the choices that we're making in our lives. The eagle, and when you think about these qualities of keen vision and being fearless and being tenacious and possessing the vitality that it wants to continue to flourish and grow, that's what the soul wants. That's what the soul wants. It wants us to be able to have the vision, to have goals for ourselves. It wants us to be fearless in managing things and knowing when to move forward and when not to. When to go to the right, when to go to the left. But that requires an inner awareness, an inner attunement, an intuition and sensitivity that your soul is trying to help and guide you by. It's tied into the Christic qualities, the Christic light that you start to emanate around you. And you're finding that you're in the right place at the right time, doing what you need to do. But we also have to be aware of the fact that if we're not taking stock of our life, looking at the goals to achieve, what we were able to achieve, what we found that we were flat-footed around, that we weren't able to do, maybe it was asking us to move in a different direction. So we're listening to the inner guidance, not just the outer guidance that we get from other people, but the inner guidance that we get from our true nature that exists within us. When we're doing those things, then we're moving through every day and every way on being better and better and better. We're looking at the areas and cherishing and celebrating the areas in which we have made improvements in, that we have gained greater clarity around. And those areas that we need to discard, like the ego, transforming, creating metamorphosis with itself through the beak, releasing the talents, releasing the body parts that are no longer serving the ego. How do we release those things in our life and in our experiences that are no longer serving us? That release them because they are no longer serving us. So there's certain behaviors, certain emotions, certain thoughts, certain reactions that we need to say, is this serving me? Is this bringing greater centeredness, peace? Or is it creating more confusion and disappointment? When we can do that level of assessment with ourselves, that is naturally done by the ego, then our soul is flourishing, as I said. Because we come to the awareness that as we're being better and better versions of ourselves, which is ultimately what the soul is wanting us to continue to evolve and to be able to do, because that is truly the substance of our life, then we are now on a different frequency, different vibration, a greater attunement to our higher nature that is always now, we're walking like side by side with us to live our best life. To live our best life. But we have to always remember there's certain tests and soul testings that we do have. That we say, well, that wasn't a great life. That wasn't a great experience. Or that wasn't a great whatever. But we know this test is happening because we're trying to learn certain things. So it goes back to being tenacious and just say, okay, there's something you want me to see here that I'm not seeing. What is it? I usually say to some of my clients, one way of seeing is another way of not seeing. So what is it do I need to see, Lord? What is it I need to garner, Lord? Guide my way, help me, guide me, aid me, so I can be able to make the course correction that may need to be taken. It's like the eagle making that metamorphosis that it needed to have happen for it to survive and continue to grow. I want to do that too. So I no longer are fearful of pain or fearful of these emotions that take place. And emotions, as I said, are energy, that they are energy in motion. And it's like water that slips through our hands. We no longer need to hold those particular emotions. We need to instead look at them, make a choice of what we want to do about them, let them go, transform them, move to a higher awareness of how you can be your best self through understanding that particular emotion, that particular situation, that particular event, that particular person, whatever it may be, as you're on the path of being your best self. Something to think about. Bye for now.
Thank you for joining me for this episode on Mastering Life's Adventures, being your best self through soul evolution. If you have enjoyed what you've heard today, I would be delighted if you would share this episode with others, leave a thumbs up, and subscribe to my Mastering Life's Adventures podcast. Look forward to your joining the next episode. Please leave any comments or suggestions you might have below. Bye for now.